This is the Dane Moore NBA podcast brought to you by Prize Picks, coming at you Thursday morning. It is May 2nd, and more Wolves Nuggets talk today on the show, this time with Britt Robson from Min Post. We are brought to you by Prize Picks. I gave you my one prize pick I liked yesterday, Aaron Gordon to make a 3 in game 1. I did a Wolves one for today. I like Naz Reid to have more than 11.5 points plus rebounds. It was 8.5 points, and I was like, all right, we'll throw the rebound thing in there. I don't know. I just feel like feels like a low number to me. I feel like Naz has to play in this series, be relied upon a little bit. So,
yep.
For those of you who are putting together a daily fantasy lineup at PrizePicks.com or on the Prize Picks app, those are two I like right now. Promo code Dane for a $100 sign up bonus. Britt, you wrote a column for today, and I liked how it wasn't just like, all right, the Jokic matchup. All right, who guards Ant, Naz, all those sort of things. You started by looking back. You're good at doing that. And you wrote about chemistry. You, years ago, told me Flip Saunders' definition of chemistry. I was like, I remember like,
and I really liked it. I mean, that's obviously I stuck with it. I've repeated it, which is basically that the team understands the pecking order. It's like it's like there are no Jalen Noels on the team, you know. Jalen Noel
had a direct Flip Saunders quote there.
No, it wasn't. But I mean, essentially what it means is that people have an innate sense of where they stand within the firmament of the team.
Right.
If, for example, Ant, despite all his generosity of spirit, didn't understand he's the man by now, that might be a chemistry problem.
Sure.
If Rudy didn't understand that he was top dog on defense, but doesn't get to exercise the same authority on what he wants to have happen on offense, that's a problem. So a pecking order essentially means not only people knowing their roles relative to themselves, but knowing their roles relative to other personnel, so that there are no jealousies. And if there are, they're internalized and accepted, like, you know, this is what we have to do. It struck me as a good definition. But then when I talked to Chris Finch about it, I think it might have even been the first interview I did with him back in 21. He frowned a little bit about it. And so I asked him his definition, and he eventually got around to the quote I put in the column, which is, you know, that the chemistry is good when a team goes onto the court expecting to win rather than hoping to win, which is a little bit tautological. You know what I mean? You know, of course, if
I don't know, man, I can see it. I'd see it right now. I mean, that is the difference of this season, if not that last Phoenix series, was we didn't expect them to win, or like, oh,
I did though.
I mean, but you know, there was a little bit more up in the air. Clearly, their mental status going into that Phoenix series was they expected to win, and to that end, and to Finch's definition, I think that does hit on what we're noticing. Yeah, a team with a.
On the other hand, don't you think Phoenix expected to win too? What happened on that chemistry?
Not after game 1. The Wolves expected to win, I think, all 4 of those games. I mean, you're right. You dance with a little being too brazen with that mentality, right? And
right.
You know, you can't just like expecting to win can be associated
there's
with laziness.
Different kinds of confidence, right? There's different kinds of confidence, and but the point being, I just needed a way to get into the idea of chemistry because it's an intangible, and to what extent does it become tangible? It's like beauty, or you know, whatever. You know it when you see it, and I really noticed it during the 2 games in Phoenix. There was just a vibe. It's the most positive vibe around a team I've seen. Now, they had 1-2 in Minneapolis, but the road games, you know, I mean, Phoenix still was regarded. A lot of people expected Phoenix to win game 3, and if not, to not be swept in game 4. And there was an ease of that. This is what I found. I've covered the Wolves long enough and been through enough ineptitude to know when a person is basically trying to cheerlead themselves into the attitude, you know, and And that can even apply to, Derrick Rose and Jimmy Butler before the Houston series or whatever. I mean, people who theoretically know better, people who are, you have to do something, even if you don't feel the confidence, you have to try to instill the confidence in yourself and your teammates. But that comes through. And what I'm talking about is that there was an ease of communication in terms of what they felt like they had to do and how they had to do it. And even more so, just copping to, and one of the examples I use is Cat. Cat doesn't usually cop to needing to be less selfish and needing to be less of a force at times on the court. That was enormous, and it paid off in the series. He was picking and choosing his spots. You used the boxer's analogy on him, which is a good one, I think, because when there's an opening, that's when you knock somebody out. When you're punching somebody's gloves, it's futile. So that is one of the three examples that I kind of use to show Cat was his best self in that Phoenix series. And really kind of was a great rebuttal to the anti-Cat folks or the he's got to go folks or he's the next one traded folks. And he was vital in the first half of game 4. He was vital in the way he did not disrupt what other people were doing on the court, which, as we know, always happened in his first few years. So, it's just a great stride. And I believe that stride happened because Ant is a welcoming alpha and has embraced Cat as a peer without it feeling forced. And I think that Gobert likes to play beside him. I just feel like even in the parts where Cat's deficiencies can corrode faith, I think this team has fully accepted the pros and cons of Cat in a manner that very few of his teammates have done in the past. And I think it's made a big difference.
I think two things come to mind when you're saying that. He was the best version of himself, yet you still needed to, while watching, fight off in your mind the possessions and where there was the stray voltage or there was the offensive fouling, there was those sort of things. I don't disagree with you,
right,
that he was the best version of himself. The best version of himself probably just does include a little bit of that, right? And
yes,
you know what I'm saying? It's like
yes.
It's a somewhat of a built-in piece to it.
Right. On the other hand, and I don't want to come off like a Cat apologist. God knows I've ripped him enough.
I think we're just.
I think that we allow windows of error.
Yep.
For different people. Cat's window versus what he needs for space is the least open.
Mm-hmm.
And some of that is because it needs to be opened wide. But some of it also is the fans are tired of it, or the people who are critics of him are tired of it. And so Cat makes 3 charges in a game, it really sticks in your mind.
Right.
Cat makes 1 charge in a game, somebody of his size and him playing on the perimeter, that is not uncommon. But we immediately go back to the history of charges and go, oh, same old Cat, ta-da, 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 So I do think everybody's got their things that annoy them, I don't like the fact that when Rudy has the ball posting up in the low block with his back to the basket, I pretty much know that is a less than 50% shot. And I don't think it's a good shot. I have to tell myself, Rudy works so hard on defense. And by the way, in his shot mix in general is usually around 70% true shooting percentage. Give him the mulligan to make a clumsy shot and waste a possession, because he's going to make it back for you in other ways. So
Ant has those too, right? Like some attentiveness stuff, during the regular season. Yeah.
So this is a good way to bring this back to chemistry. I think teammates inevitably are going to have the same feelings.
Mm-hmm.
What is the generosity of spirit among your teammates for those windows they're allowing you for errors? Mm-hmm. And I really feel like right now they're really tolerant team with each other. Mm-hmm. They are really feeling like the priority here is not to criticize, but to correct, and not to get down or frustrated by something, but to accept the fact that we have to redouble our efforts now because of that play being wasted or whatever. I just feel like there is a mature attitude on this team about what needs to be done among all the people. And the fact that Cat is benefiting from that and then giving back with an attitude that stretches his usual way of thinking. Right. You know, for example, that Cat told us that after game 3 was supposed to be, and I looked it up, but he was right, it was supposed to be his first 5-on-5 scrimmaging after his surgery. He beat that by 2 weeks, and those 2 weeks were crucial because it got him 2 regular season games and got him ready during that week that everybody got ready. Mm-hmm. And he dropped that. Yeah, I mean, he said it. He was the one that raised it, but he usually would do something like that with, like, you know, that attitude Cat has where he's trying not to brag, but it's so obvious that he wants to brag. Mm-hmm. I really felt like this one was a little bit like, hey, you know, just remember this, you know?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I remember, so that was game 3. And I remember between games 2 and game 3 watching back game 2 and having this like thought of like, oh yeah, Carl's not healthy yet, you know, or like,
right.
Like he is still reacclimating, because of course he is, because that was the only, he played 2 games at the end of the regular season and 2 there. And, you know, I think my emotion in the moment watching games 1 and 2 with Cat was like, forgetting that and being like, oh man, you know, stray voltage. Here's the foul again here. Like the things that bothered me the most in the moment, and I caught myself, were the post ups. So it's like Eric Gordon on him, and it's like, wait a minute, why did that hit the back of the backboard, Cat? You know, but then I'm remembering it's like he doesn't have his, whether it's his lower body's healthy or his strength or whatever it might be. And I'm like, okay, wait. Like this isn't necessarily Cat doing something goofy. This might be just Cat not having his legs under him in the way that he normally would if he was healthy. And then boom, you know, game 3, kind of a little bit more of that, the start of the first quarter, the start of the third quarter, he really stabilized them. And then in game 4, if it weren't for Ant scoring 31 points in the second half, like that is the Cat game, you know, and maybe that just means the comfort and the health is coming around for Cat. And to that end, maybe he was just reminding us, you know, when he said it was supposed to be today, that I was, you know, I was supposed to get going again.
Yeah, in other words, it was an appropriate. It wasn't like a exaggerated humble brag. It was a, hey, you know, you know, this is I'm not 100%, but I don't want to say I'm not 100% to the media.
Right. There was 2 others. There too, I think, that were a representation of this chemistry, and you wrote about it a little bit too, was when we interviewed Mike Conley and Nickeil Alexander-Walker in the locker room. I think that was also after game 3, and those 2 kind of did it together, and you saw this like big brother uncle sort of thing. And Nickeil and Mike Conley go back to the Utah days, and they've both been guards on that team and on this team and all of that. And you were like, oh yeah, like part of the reason Nickeil Alexander-Walker has elevated is because of the chemistry he has with the starting point guard, his superior in this situation, who is also a superior who just genuinely wants to help, not necessarily out of like the goodness of his heart, but because Mike is like, I know, like, we need you. Like I need to pick and choose my spots so as to empower others, so that they can kind of cook, you know, like me as Mike Conley can't do everything that Nickeil Alexander-Walker can do here too. How do I bring him along? So there's that one. There was Rudy and Ant at the podium together after game 3. And, you know, they're doing the X thing and Rudy's talking about being concussed. And then after game 4, the Cat and Ant at the podium together sort of thing. And then, you know, stop fucking fouling, like sort of thing, which is also a direct quote. So there was signals of that, and maybe some people would be like, oh, well, you know, they're just at the podium now because it's the playoffs or it's that. And it's like, yes, those are getting the cameras now and the more views. But I think what we can give from our perspective is those things that look good on social media or whatever, also to us feel like a culmination of something that has been building over the course of not just this season, honestly, back to last season's trade deadline, when they traded for Mike Conley and figured out what this group was actually going to be. Like, I think what we're both saying is there's something real behind that. And quite frankly, they need a chemistry. They need a continuity and a connectivity to even be able to compete with Denver. And that's why it's a good place to start. And we'll get into all the matchup stuff and all those sort of things. But starting on that ground gives you the idea that this could be a fair fight against Denver.
Right. And also, what I would like to say is people who see, the national folks who see that, you know, see the interaction, catch, you know, a 30-second bite on ESPN or whatever. We cover this team, and we know, for example, Cat's words were neon for me because it exemplified some internal things that has gone through that are really positive. And we know what Nickeil Alexander-Walker is like when he says this is like a brother to me. He's not kidding. You know, I mean, you know, this is, I mean, this is, he is one of the most sincere. I mean, I almost threw in the Matthew 12 through 29 or whatever he wanted to put in, some kind of Bible verse about things. I mean, the guy really is a straight up sincere dude who wants to convey how he is helped and blessed in life. And so that's a good teammate to have around. And Mike Conley is a helper. And so it just, you get these dynamics that you've been following for months now. And yeah, you can see a 30-second soundbite and you go, yeah, oh yeah, you know, but Wolves have something there. But the depth of it, one of the important things, I mean, when I was doing power rankings for ESPN, excuse me, SSI, SI.com.
That's who you worked for.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So, I mean, but I couldn't cover the team as a beat as much. And so as a result, you know, you get a broader knowledge of the NBA, but you don't have that intimacy of a beat. So if you're going to talk chemistry, the point being you can parachute in, but you're not going to get, your judgment isn't going to be as sound as if you're coming in cold. And so chemistry is a good thing for somebody like you or me, or, you know, shout out to Jace Frederick, who did an entire column on the Conley-Naw press conference after game 3, which almost made me not use it, but the stuff was just so good that I figured I'd throw it in there anyway, because it was exactly the kind of vibe I was trying to put through. But again, Jace covers the team. He understands Conley. He's very, very tight with Conley because Conley does that thing for the pie press. So anyway, the point being, nobody knows internal team chemistry outside the team better than the beat writers. Inside the team, obviously, they know it better than the beat writers. But
well, and so much of the time we've been telling you I've been doing this for 7 years. We've been telling you about the other side of it, of like, the vibe here doesn't make sense. The vibe here doesn't make sense with Jimmy Butler and Jamal Crawford and all that versus the young guys, or all those things. And I mean, and you've been in way more locker rooms than I have, but like, this actually is not normal. This is to all be in a collective sort of good place, or at least to the extent that we could see it, you know.
Right.
I'm sure there's power dynamics.
I think
going
Josh
on.
Minot kind of wants more minutes.
That one does come to mind. Oh, wait, no, you weren't even at practice yesterday.
No.
Oh my God. Him and Kyle Anderson were playing one-on-one while we were doing the interviews, and they got in a fight.
Are you kidding me?
Like a little, you know, you get beaten one-on-one and you get a little like jar. That's funny you said that. I thought you brought that up because it was on the other hoop, like right across the way from where we were doing interviews. And there's all of a sudden this big crash. And I back it up like, okay, the one-on-one game between Josh Minot and Kyle Anderson didn't go well.
Oh man.
But broadly, right? I mean, that's what it is. And I will say, because you and I, particularly you and I, we totally rolled our eyes at the whole, you know, we want to get good guys on the team when Tim Conley,
the Tim Conley thing,
came in, and I'm like, okay, of course you do. And like, well, that looks like that was
he walked his talk. I mean, one of the things that I have come to accept and trumpet about Tim Conley is he's walked his talk.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he wasn't talking straight. I think he was dodging early, but I think that once he began to settle in, he got better and better at it. And now, you know, I mean, the first question I asked him on media day is, are you planning on keeping Mike Conley? He said, Mike Conley, I hope to have Mike Conley here for the rest of his career. Just basically said it straight out.
Yep.
Before the season is over, Conley's added for 2 more years. I mean, that's the kind of thing. If somebody tells me something, I file it, and then it happens, then I'm going to believe you more next time.
Right.
You know, and he is stacking some truths. So, you know, hats off.
Let's cover our first break here. We want to let you all know about Falling Knife Brewing Company. I'll let you know about the live show we're going to do there. I need to let Britt know about it, see if he's going to come to it. We announced that. We announced that yesterday. But first, I just like, in all genuine seriousness, like, not just because they're a sponsor, I can't think of a better way and place to be watching the Wolves play a playoff game if I can't afford a $500 ticket to go to Target Center to watch the game, then Falling Knife. They have this, you know, just a sweet Wolves fan community there that they've developed, but they have this whole outdoor area. They have a patio. They get this big TV truck with sound and everything like that. And it's such like an organic and genuine, like, people bring their lawn chairs. Like, it reminds me of like when my mom would bring me to like a movie in the park. You get like the little, you get, I don't know, your blanket on the ground and snacks, except snacks replaced with really good beer at Falling Knife. So what are the games? The games are on Saturday and
Monday, I think.
Saturday and Monday. I mean, I think particularly Saturday will be really fun there. I know they've had to dance around some weather and stuff for this, but really, like, if you're going to be going somewhere to watch the game, I really think Falling Knife is a
well. And another
option.
thing is there are segments of the bar.
Mm-hmm.
So you can choose what type of experience you want. If you want to be outdoors, fine. If you want to be on the patio, kind of listening to the game and looking over and seeing something, but not.
Well, and the TV truck you could probably see from the patio.
Well, that's what I mean, but not perched right in front of it.
Yeah.
If you just want to be like patio conversation, but also kind of watching. And if you want to be inside there, you can be near or far from a series of televisions. And the greater point to me is that these guys are fans. Well, I mean, I always say that. That goes without saying now for me. But I do think that it's not a cynical approach. You know, these guys are Wolves fans. These guys would be watching the game whether they owned a bar or not.
That's true. That's true. That's true. And then live show will be May 9th. It's the day before Game 3. We'll do the typical like 6 p.m. happy hour, 7 p.m. Live show. I know I lock Kyle in to doing that, and hopefully, Britt, that'll be able to work in your schedule.
Sure, I think that'll work. May 9th?
May 9th. Yeah, it's just the day right before Game 3, kind of like what we did before game
Yeah.
one of the first series. So keep that on your schedules for May 9th. Always considering falling knife. And then also today's show is brought to you by Autograph and the Autograph app. One thing as an added sort of perk for downloading the Autograph app, which is free, it just has all Wolves content in one place. You get these fan credits for consuming content through their app. With the fan credits, you can enter yourself into an opportunity to win $24 tickets to Game 3 at Target Center. So again, free app, free place to consume our content. You get these tokens for it, these fan credits, and you can use those to be entered into a drawing for tickets. That drawing will happen also on May 9th between 2 and 2:15. So just download the Autograph app in the App Store or Google Play Store. Use referral code DaneMoore. You can use the QR code that's up here on the screen on YouTube. Again, that's the referral code DaneMoore. Just a place to get all your Wolves content and opportunity to be able to go to Game 3 for $24. And I know that's approximately a 95% discount on what everybody else is, maybe more than that, paying for games. So just a cool thing one to have on your radar, but also just get the Autograph app. You're consuming a ton of Wolves content right now. The Wolves community has all of that. All right, Brett. Let's get into the series. Let's get into to some specifics. I mean, kind of. Brett also has an and one section of his.
It's a newsletter thing,
newsletter.
It's a way for me to bust out of the space restrictions that MinPost has often, and so it's a way. If you subscribe to the newsletter, you get things that I would normally be writing for the column that I couldn't write for the column before because there was a word limit, and now it's an N1. So it was a great compromise in terms of, for me, I wanted to write about chemistry. I wanted to write about my 4 keys to the series. Couldn't do both.
2 things.
So now, now the N1 subscribers got the 4 keys.
Yeah. And you can just, by going to MinPost,
and it's free, by the way.
article.
It's a free
it's just, you just put your email in.
Yeah.
And then you're going to get this newsletter in your inbox. But I think these are probably the things
they're basics,
But they're a good jumping off point, I think, for us to dig into it. I guess I'll just say what they are now. Defending Jokic, the Wolves defending Jokic, the Nuggets defending Ant, Jaden's temper. That was an interesting one you threw in there. And then Naz Reid off the bench. Let's start at the top. Let's start with Jokic, and handling it. It's like
you found what I found, right? There's not a lot of continuity if you're looking at these games. I mean, you can't get a lot of empirical data out of this series. That they split 2 and 2, but I mean, it was Murray was out. There was a time when both Cat and Rudy were out,
and Naz.
That was right. That's right. All 3 of them.
So can I make the case for still finding value in it? Because I did.
No, I think there is value. Also, we have all of last year and the playoffs. To look at.
Right, and we know that the normal jumping off point is how you match up with them, right? And priority number 1 is Cat on Jokic, Gobert in the spy, right?
Yep.
But what we did learn in a lot of these other games, or what we got to see, is the Wolves defending Nikola Jokic and the Nuggets not that way. Whether that be Naz Reid or Kyle Anderson taking the Jokic matchup with Rudy and the spy. That's an important variable in this.
Right. And then when they did have to go to Rudy being head up on Jokic, things fell apart. Which I thought was interesting.
But that's what I'm saying. It was kind of like this avalanche.
Exactly.
They went to Rudy on Jokic because Naz and Kyle weren't doing that in the 4th game. Game, the game 80 of the season, I think.
Right.
And so I actually think that part sticks out to me as really important, is in the non-Cat minutes, can Kyle or Naz enact a similar style of defense on Jokic that Cat does when he's out there? And the answer was no in game 80. But also, man, the game I watched back last night was the 3rd game, the one the Wolves looked the best at, Naz started at the 4. Naz did a great job in that game on that. So it's like, you know, I did the thing where I just first went through and like watched all of the Jokic defensive possessions. And you're like, and then there'll be these periods of time and you go, okay, no, Naz, no. You can't, you can't do that. Then you get to the 3rd game and you're like, wow, okay, like that was good. And then you get to the 4th game and it doesn't. So I think that element of it is the most unknown to us of like how they're going to guard him in those times. And if then they go to the Rudy on Jokic one, which Jokic absolutely destroyed in one-on-one.
Welcome that matchup. He welcomed that matchup, and it's because Jokic is most comfortable. We've seen him enough now. You know, he likes to take the toughest defender because it means his teammates are open. There's always going to be teammates open. And if Jokic knows teammates are open, he will dice you up like a Vegemite. I mean, you know, he will just basically throw passes that you feel, oh, that guy was wide open right next to the hoop. I mean, you know, he is the best passer in the NBA. I said arguably in the column just because, you know, you got to think about it, I guess. But he makes finesse passes that have just a tiny, tiny margin of error. And they just, you know, like that one where he was running after a loose ball and he had to tip it with his like a volleyball punch with his thumb. And it became like a perfect in stride semi lob for the guy. I mean, just nuts. Things that are just, you know.
Yeah, it looks like when you're like, looks like the big teenager playing in the backyard with the 8-year-olds, and you're just like tipping the ball, you're just holding it above their head, and you're like, okay, cool, 14-year-old, you know how to beat the 8-year-olds. But Nikola Jokic consistently does that. I'm just bigger, and I'm kind of thinking this more than you.
But if Jokic scores on you, you just go, okay, it's Jokic. When Jokic gets a teammate off, like wide open with a beautiful pass or whatever, or leads him perfectly, or knows exactly when the guy is breaking or whatever, two things happen. The guy who scores is feeling pumped. The guy who defends the guy who scores is a little bit crestfallen. I mean, it is a much more effective weapon against an opposing defense than Jokic simply scoring. And conversely, the games in which Jokic almost had a 1-to-1 assist to turnover ratio in 3 games against the Wolves before the final game. Jokic played all 4 games. He was 7-2, 7 assists, 2 turnovers in game 4. He was 17-14 overall, which means he was 10 assists and 12 turnovers in 3 games. 10 assists and 12 turnovers. For the season, his assist to turnover ratio is 3-to-1, 9 assists, 3 turnovers. He wasn't even 1-to-1 in 3 games against the Wolves until that 7-to-2 thing where he again got that 3-to-1 ratio back up and running. So
he was an isolation scorer, Britt. Like he was an isolation scorer kind of, you know, in all of those matchups in many ways, which he's also awesome at. But if you are limiting,
preferable option.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think the preferable option is just that it's not both. I'm not totally sure if one's.
I think one cuts the heart out of the defense more.
Yeah,
Naz Reid and Kyle Anderson are going back to the bench, going, I can't guard Nikola Jokic. Well, you know what else is new? The sun's up. You know, I mean, you know, it's not the same. So
can I show you this clip?
Yeah.
I was just watching the game back, and I thought this was really interesting. And Finch kind of talks after the fact, like you can just see his mouth. Jokic here, boom. Jokic hits first there, right?
Yep.
And now watch it. Like now it's like, okay, I found this is the first possession of the 3rd quarter. They're like, all right, we're going Jokic at Naz. Watch Finch. They'll cut to Finch right here, and he's just shaking his head, and he's like, you have to hit first. You have to. You have to. Right? Like and that is so true, and such a part of this series is doing these small things, particularly against Nikola Jokic, particularly with not your best defenders,
Right.
to just be smart and meticulous, to do those things, to like, if you do have some sort of answer here where you're like, hey, we can hold Jokic to single digit assists in this game. So then if we know we have something for that, then what do we have for the isolation version of him and those sort of things? And those are going to be the small things that Reid and Anderson, Rudy, when he's in that situation, like Cat, so as to not get into foul trouble. Like, remember we talked in the last series so much about Ant needs to think the coverage against Phoenix, right? This is what the Wolves have to do. They have to think their coverage against Jokic in this series. And again, it's hard. Like, it's like, just like it was stacked against Ant, it's stacked against them in this series, but you can win some on the
I am really glad, though, you said hit first rather than bring a double, because you do not want to bring a double on Jokic. Yeah. I mean, how many times
only Rudy maybe just because he times it so well, but yeah, like if it's Nikhil, like there was a couple that they were bringing Nikhil down on top side doubles.
The one way that you can really swarm Jokic is on offensive rebounds, or an offensive rebound and then a pass to him when everybody's clustered near the hoop anyway. Because one of the things I've noticed about Jokic is he doesn't do second chance points. He doesn't do many kickouts. He's either going right up or he's seeing somebody fairly near him.
Yeah, he like weirdly stays up.
Yeah, and you can cluster then. But if you cluster Jokic in a half court setting, he will kill you. And you just can't do it. Because he will dice you up. And 10 assists and 12 turnovers indicates to me that the Wolves know that. And they have the best collection of on-ball perimeter defenders in the NBA. So it makes sense that bothers Jokic. And I think that bothers Jokic far more than double teams and harassment. Jokic welcomes that. It's kind of like what Rudy said to Ant. He's got to appreciate it. If you put two on him, it's the ultimate sign of respect. Well, Jokic sees it as the ultimate sign of respect that he has already learned how to defeat, So I don't know. It remains to be seen. I'm sure smarter minds than not mine are really working hard on figuring out how to, reduce Jokic's enormous impact on offense. But,
and conversely too, Denver, like that play right there, I think that's a really good example because it's the first play of the third quarter. Right. So they've had halftime. They know how they're guarding him.
And the ultimate ATO, right?
Yeah, exactly. And you know where Aaron, like they run 2-man with Porter Jr. and Jokic on the weak side, and Gordon is in the strong side corner where Rudy is now as far removed out of being able to help that. So it's like the Wolves do a good job in that, but Denver is going to stress that job with, being more and more technical about where and when they get to Jokic and how they place, the pieces around him. And that's why this is gonna be fascinating. This is great. Like this is high level. This is high level basketball, and it becomes the really micro adjustments to adjustments to adjustments.
Yeah. Well, you know what else is scary though, is Michael Porter Jr. has become a good passer. I mean, that's
become a good player.
Yeah, that's not good. Well, his defense still remains up and down.
You know my rule on if you're a bad defender, at least be big, and he's that.
He is big. You're right. He's taller than everybody thinks because he's a scorer, and scorers aren't. I mean, he's got the KD release point. Right. So, but that third quarter in game 3, I think it was, against Denver. The one when we were in Phoenix, I saw it on the HD big ass TV in my hotel room. But Michael Porter Jr. fed Aaron Gordon for dunks 3 times in like 5 minutes
from the half court. Where he's the threat to shoot, and then became a threat.
And I will tell you, when I saw that, I thought, man, Nikola Jokic isn't even involved in any of this, and they are carving people up.
Yeah. Let's move over to defending Ant.
Yeah.
And well, I broken record. I've been saying this every day or every interview I've done of like, my opinion, you know this, like, I think you got to prioritize Ant, and I would, the way I start my sheet that says defending Ant is I'm going to prioritize Gordon on him and shift matchups around there, probably leaving myself exposed with Cat. That's the way I would start thinking about it. How do you start thinking about putting your Denver hat on, your Ryan Saunders hat, defensive coordinator of
right. Good point.
the Denver Nuggets, who knows Anthony Edwards pretty well. How do you and Cat knows Cat well too. How do you start managing?
I think Gordon still operates best in the mid-range into the paint. I think if he's on Ant as an assignment, then Ant can take him a little bit further out, which does provide more interior opportunities. Yeah, so what I would do, I think that KCP has been and has evolved beyond KCP being able to handle him, I think. But did you notice that game? It might have even been the last game where they brought Christian Brown into the game and played him almost the entire second half. And he was meeting all high pick and rolls at the level. Some of them were Conley, but a lot of them were Ant. And that guy, the guy in the NBA who defends Ant best is Lou Dort. And it's because he's a brick shithouse. I mean, he is basically a really strong, solid guy. And Christian Brown is a poor man's Lou Dort. Yep. He can be somebody who tries to blow up the pick and roll or tries to just glue himself to Ant. Now, it could lead to foul trouble, and it could be that it won't be successful with prolonged exposure. But Denver's defense looked really good against the Wolves when he was one of those point of attack defenders. And it's his second year, third year in the league. He's eager. He gets a bigger role in he will play his ass off. And we're not even talking about Peyton Watson yet. I mean, they may be able to use their bench defense in a way that we're thinking about Naz and Kyle on Jokic. They may be able to use bench personnel.
That's a good comp.
To, bother Ant for minutes that you don't have to use Aaron Gordon or KCP. They may ride with KCP, and Murray is actually a underrated tough defender sometimes. I don't think either one of them are necessarily going to slow Ant down that much, particularly KCP, who I just don't think has the physical capability to stay with 2024 Ant. But
yeah, he's super technical, but not as physical. And that's where, so to your point about like the beat guys knowing it kind of better than anyone else. I remember going to Denver, and I went on the show with Harrison Wind and Adam Mares, who cover the Nuggets, and I presented my big like Aaron Gordon should be guarding Ant presentation. And I will say it was before that game. What those guys said was Christian Brown. They pointed to that, and that ended up being true of that Brown. If they need more size and strength on Ant, the next step is Christian Brown, I think, which maybe implies that like Aaron Gordon is more of like the break glass in case of emergency, or end of the half, end of a quarter, kind of the way the Wolves use Ant as a point of attack defender, or situationally.
And I would also maybe regard Aaron Gordon as kind of like a hybrid. He's got some Rudy qualities about him on defense too. He's a great rim protector who also is quick.
Sure.
His quickness, it's probably, now that I think about it, a little bit more of a tortured analogy, but essentially I do think that Aaron Gordon is a better defender against front court personnel than he is against wing personnel.
Yeah, and I think I disagree.
Okay.
Like,
well, I don't know what we're going to find out.
Yeah, right.
I will tell you.
I'd say that with hesitation because I think it's close. I just think we don't see it as much from Aaron Gordon. And again, before that game, I remember I had just watched the Nuggets had played the Mavs like 2 days before that game, and the Nuggets put Aaron Gordon on Doncic. And I was like, they should do that against the Wolves too. But you got to also kind of think about the fallout of that, right? Against Dallas, Okay, now Aaron Gordon isn't guarding the 4. That's PJ Washington. Okay, like
Right.
we can figure that out with Michael Porter Jr.
Right.
The fallout is much more intense with the Wolves when you take Gordon off of Cat or Naz,
right,
and you put him on Ant. Now Cat or Naz have this opportunity against Michael Porter Jr. or maybe even KCP if they're totally de-emphasizing it. So, you know, I also get the restraint on the Denver side. I guess my point is, my guess is the best option in the series is going to be Aaron Gordon. The question is, how much can they afford? How much time can they afford to dedicate?
You are actually depositing the most logical counter. What you're saying is Ant is an alpha scorer. We have an alpha defender who is our best chance of significantly reducing that with this guy. And the other thing about him, Ant has been great at skip passing and probing and then passing. I don't think Phoenix had the awareness and the quickness to discourage that passing. But they brought Okogie into the game, and things got a little tougher for that Ant just being able to get off it whenever he felt like it. And I think that if KCP is not a great on-ball defender option for Ant, but he's a lane filler, and he's quick and he's smart. And Gordon obviously is that way. Porter Jr., I think, has improved a little bit as a defender. He's still not a very good on-ball defender, but probably good off-ball defender. Bottom line, I mean, those guys have just played together for so long that they've learned how to be a good defensive unit.
And Britt, they played for so long in this coverage as their base. Yeah. They bring Jokic up. It doesn't need to be. And what did we learn the high wall year with the Wolves? They got better at it over time once you get comfortable at it. And it's such a timing exercise for the low man and leaving that corner guy and knowing when to come over there. And that's what I think Denver presents in this series is they're going to throw a similar put 2 on the ball coverage on Ant. The difference is they've been doing that for 5 years.
They are going to turn Ant over when Ant wants to get off it.
They're just going to be sharper with it. Phoenix played Nurkic in a drop the whole year, you know, like they weren't as acclimated.
And also, I think that if you watch Ant all those games, there is a timing, a metronomic pattern to what he does. He tries to score first. He tries to do the between the legs dribble and probe the defense, comes back out. When the double starts to converge more, he twists his body and zips it, skip pass to the weak side or strong side, but still a distance away from him. That just happens all the time. It's patterned. It's patterned. And so those things are easily scouted, and Denver has the personnel. I mean, I hope I'm wrong, and it could be that those passes won't be intercepted as much. Right. And Ant may learn the hard way. I mean, they may, you know, he may have 6 turnovers in game 1. But I think that it is a worry. It is a worry. And then you got two horses off the bench in Peyton Watson and Christian Brown, who like to screw things up on defense. It's part of their identity.
But 2 players that Mike Malone does not fully trust to play all the time, as was indicated in game 5 when I think Christian Brown
wasn't that weird? Yeah. Well, I mean, they played like the single-digit minutes, right?
Yeah. I think Peyton Watson played 5 and Christian Brown didn't play in the second half, something like
that.
Yeah,
exactly.
So yeah, so that's the thing is,
but that could have been offense too. I mean, they figured, you know, got to score, and I think weren't they down in like the 3rd period anyway. I mean, I think that
game 5.
I think that Malone couldn't. You can't use your defensive guys as often if you don't have confidence in the offense being able to overcome the deficit. So I think that was part of it. But you're right in the fact that when the game is on the line, he wants his 5. And, you know, I mean, to some extent. And he doesn't have Bruce Brown. He doesn't have Bruce Brown, who really was the 6th man on that team. So
let's keep moving on to your two final points, which were Jaden's temper and Naz Reid off the bench. Let's start with the Jaden one, which I think is a way of talking about the importance of Jaden McDaniels in the Jamal Murray matchup, which we obviously didn't get to see a year ago because of his temper, Jaden McDaniels not being available, breaking his hand or wrist or whatever it was, from punching the wall. How are you thinking about Jaden in this series?
Well, I've just watched them. They have been two of the players, I think. Well, Murray missed one game. I don't think he missed two. Did he?
I think he missed two.
Did he miss two? Well, anyway, the two they played were pretty memorably fierce. I mean, they did not like each other. And they were trying to fuck each other up. I mean, they really were trying to remember there was a play where, like, all of a sudden you saw Jaden McDaniels shove Murray right underneath the basket, like into the stanchion. And then the replay shows that, like, in kind of like the scrum just before that happened, Murray did something kind of annoying and petty.
Oh, dude, it's just like the Booker thing when Booker gave him the offensive lineman hit, like Jaden kind of bumped him before that. Yeah,
exactly. So, I mean, that kind of extracurricular stuff is going to happen. And Murray, I think, understands Jaden McDaniels. I mean, you get a reputation, and of all the players, he has to keep his cool. First of all, let me say that it would not be tragedy if McDaniels gets mentally played out, because I thought Naz did a phenomenal job on Jamal Murray in that playoff series. On the other hand, Denver won 4 out of those 5 games. So, I mean, it's all relative, right? But Jamal Murray is a big-time player. He arrives for the playoffs. He's already got 2 game winners on his belt from this playoffs already. The dude is ice cold in the clutch. And Jaden McDaniels being able to bother him, if he can bother him 3/4 as much as he bothered Devin Booker, I'll be ecstatic. I think that it is it's a great matchup. It's one of those marquee matchups that we're looking forward to, but it is a chippy matchup. And I
do feel like Jaden was super chippy in the Phoenix series, but with a control about it. He got hit and he was like, and then guys came over to grab him. He's like, I'm cool. And not in the screaming, I'm cool, when we know that means you're not cool.
Right.
But
the problem with Jaden, he goes from 0 to 60 in a blink, man. I mean, if he the Klay Thompson jersey twisting, or whatever, they're just things all of a sudden, woo, next thing you know, here we go,
If you're going to get in a fight, make sure it's with one of the good Denver players. Don't get ejected in a fight with Christian Brown. Exactly. There's just be something like neutralizing here.
And I don't get in a fight at all simply because, I mean, if you're going to take Jamal Murray out with you, that'd be fine. But it is... I just think that one of the things that I did notice now that we don't have as good as seats on the road, I'm enjoying the home seats and remembering the detail you get to see when you're home. That watching relatively up close and personal Murray and McDaniels going at it stuck in my head as like,
because that shove into the stanchion literally happened right in front of the target set.
But and also just away from the play, I began to notice that they were trying to. The difference is the game within a game was they were trying to show each other up, and that's when it began. Everybody on the playground knows that stuff. I mean, when some guy's trying to show you up, there's a different edge to it than if you're just playing hard, quote unquote, somebody's trying to embarrass you. And there may be strategic reasons for it, or there may just be personal animus reasons for it. But at the end of the day, Jaden has to be able to deal with it in a manner that is most effective for his team.
And Britt, what about like on the offensive side of the floor?
That's a good
question. What I'm writing down right now too, is like, well, how do you apply that, like, mental confidence or whatever to the offensive side as well? Because that's I mean, Jaden is volatile producer offensively,
Right,
and a
right.
lot of that seems to be as a product of rhythm or confidence,
Right,
you know.
right.
And I think that's an important like must have in the majority of games in this series. I think is that Jaden,
well, his
confident
signature
offensively.
shot, in my opinion, is that rocking chair mid-range.
Yeah.
And that's going to be tough against MPJ and Aaron Gordon. Those are two guys, even that, you know, short mid-range, try to loft it over them. You know, if he takes it off the bounce and one of those guys slides over to help, you know, it may not be as automatic. I do see him getting open in the corners because they're going to have to put two on Ant. And
that's I want more than just corner threes.
Yeah,
because those can come and go.
Yeah, I do think, and I have no. This isn't empirical, and I think I said it to you. Maybe I said it on the Minpost Zoom. Hard to know anymore. But essentially, I actually think Jaden McDaniels' shooting percentage rises when Ant is feeding him the ball. Some of it is just their buds, but Ant knows how to pass it to Jaden. They're usually really great passes right into his midsection, right where, and he likes to come up with the shot from his stomach up. You know, I think if he has it like chest.
I don't think this is empirical. I mean, and we can go off this being one pass away from the initial playmaker. Who else did he play really well with, you know, before the Gobert Conley thing? D'Lo found him as suck the defense in. There's Jade. Like and D'Lo had a confidence in Jaden McDaniels that Anthony Edwards has in Jaden McDaniels. A confidence that's like not 100% of the time warranted, but it feels good to have that confidence 100% of the time. And Ant has that in Jaden.
And if your friend is dishing you the ball and you're wide open, you just it feels right. You know what I mean? And I don't know, you know, obviously I haven't played basketball for decades, but I mean and I don't know how pros, you know, think about it if they have any of these same kinds of thoughts, but it would make sense to me that when you like somebody and they're feeding you the ball and they know where you like the ball, that there's just your mind is in a zone that is more conducive to accuracy.
Yes, no, absolutely, and we've seen it. We just have seen that with Ant.
So I'd like to see that if Jaden can get off 2 or 3 made threes a game, that would be 5 points.
In addition to rocking chair, in addition to offensive rebounds, like doesn't maybe need to be all of them every game, but I think it's important.
That mix, right?
Yeah, that there is a mix, right? That there's multiple things in there. Let's do last thing. Let's do Naz.
Yeah, speaking of which, I really think this is Naz Reid has to show up in a charismatic Naz Reid way, you know, a towel waving 27, 6, and 2 performance in 34 minutes or something, or 29 minutes or whatever. Having that, if you're going to win the non-Jokic minutes, you're going to have to beat some really good perimeter wings, Brown and Watson. And you know, Reggie Jackson obviously is a weak spot. But they'll keep, you know, Gordon on the floor. Naz will have to he'll be tested against some good defenders, but Naz is the 6th man of the year for a reason. You know, I mean, he's got the bag he can dribble, he can shoot threes. I was really heartened after game 1 in Phoenix. After that, not so much. And so I think he's to use the cliche, he's one of the big X factors in the series. If Naz has a really good series against Denver, I think the Wolves' chances of winning go up quite a bit.
It's just going to be interesting to see how the Wolves try to weaponize those minutes for themselves, right? They didn't, you know, when Cat wasn't playing and Jokic was off the floor, so was
it was not a lot because of that.
And so it was just like a group of guys, you know, they got into like the 2-point guard thing and they tried to move it, and you know, they switched everything, that Denver switched everything, and They will again. They're going to put Gordon at the 5 in the non-Jokic minutes, and they're just going to try and lock up one-on-one for 4 minutes or 5 minutes until Jokic gets back into the game. So I think the counter, if you're the Wolves, is we got to put more juice into those minutes. And I think you have a choice of, do we change Ant's rotation and try and make it so Ant's out there when Jokic isn't? I don't think they're going to do that, just because this is the way they've always kind of rolled with Ant's minutes, and that's how stars work. You know, they play the whole first quarter, sit for 5 minutes. They play the whole third quarter, sit for the first 4 or 5 minutes of the fourth quarter. Like, I think that's what it's going to be. So then it becomes, all right, what offensive thing are you prioritizing? And what the Wolves now have is Cat, but they also have Naz there. And so I was thinking about it. I'm like, all right, do you go for those minutes then maybe to target them to be Cat and Naz minutes? Because now you got 2 real offensive weapons against a depleted and much smaller second unit. I will say also the non-Jokic minutes are not always just limited to this. Jokic will probably get in foul trouble at some point in a series too, and you got to jump on that if you're the Wolves. And you got to win those minutes by 8. You know, like that. You just gotta you got to do that. So I think it's important to have what that plan is, and we'll figure out what it is. But you know what part of me is thinking about in those minutes? All 3 bigs. And I know maybe they didn't go to it enough in the regular season to feel super confident with rolling that out in a big spot, which this would be a big spot in the playoffs. But there's part of me that goes, all right, if they're going to go Aaron Gordon at the 5, we can pretty comfortably get within our rotations to Rudy, Cat, Naz. Right. And Ant's off. And so maybe it's like Nikhil and
And what you would then do is use Kyle to supplement the minutes Rudy has to sit because he's on the court.
Yeah, or even Naz in the first quarter, you just bring Rudy out earlier so as to get him back in to the start of the second. Broad point being, Naz is a part of that. I just wonder if he can be a bigger part of that if Cat's also out there, and if then collectively they can be an even bigger part of that by having Rudy out there, because then I think Rudy's presence out there just stymies that group of defensively.
Well, I will tell you what. The biggest determinant of whether that will be a success or not is turnovers. The Wolves are turning it over, they'll get routed. If the Wolves keep control of the ball and run their half court, it could be very effective. But I do worry the problem with the Naz, Cat, Rudy is they're all turnover machines.
Yeah, and they struggle against the switching defense. Yeah. And, you know, as I'm saying this out loud.
And they don't have this foot speed to get back.
True. But yeah, and I guess it is a smaller Denver group. Also, why it probably won't be all 3 and why it probably won't be Rudy at all is they're going to try and glue as many of Rudy's minutes to Jokic as possible. Like
for the lurking, right?
For the and so maybe it's not that, but maybe it's Cat. I think it's Cat and Naz, right? Like that's what you're leaning into, that group, that pairing, which we've seen be dominant. We've seen it be combustible. Like that is a huge part of this, is like taking advantage of it. And it's a good time to get Carl going. You know, it's just
well, one of the ways to think about Denver is in different ways, but still recognizable ways. Christian Brown and Peyton Watson are Vandos. Both of them are Vandos.
Sure.
And so what that means is if they can turn you over, they will go. If they get you in a half-court offense, you're going to have trouble, you know? And so obviously they're a little bit, well, certainly Christian Brown is better on offense than Vando, but I do think that turnovers, if that second unit cannot turn you over for Denver, then Denver is maybe not in trouble, but they are needing to make that up. I think they're accustomed to having their defense come in and win the matchup via a bursts of turnovers. And so what I would look for in that is, you know, I mean, my Monty Morris faith got tested a little bit against Phoenix. He is one of those guys that doesn't turn the ball over and recognizes, you know, high court IQ, maybe even J-Mac, although I'm a little nervous about that. But I do think you need to have you need to have people who can take care of the ball, but also be comfortable with quick decisions.
Well, and that's a question about and Nikhil did a great job of this, playing backup point guard. He got the point guard minutes.
Yep.
But if we're looking at Nickeil Alexander-Walker versus Mike Conley or even Monte Morris or Jordan McLaughlin, you get so many more things from Nickeil Alexander-Walker. What you do lose is a little bit of ball control, right? His
handle just isn't as good as the other three.
Yeah. I do think not whatever the combinations are, and just Naz needs to be a weapon off the bench, and particularly against the mixed lineups of Denver. That's what a six-man does in a playoff series.
I co-sign that 100%.
If it is Peyton Watson, Christian Brown, Justin Holiday on him, whoever. Like
when Naz Reid goes to the hoop, he needs to finish or get fouled. He cannot turn the ball over. He can't miss badly because the transition will happen. If missed layups, Finch is fond of saying missed layups are as bad as a turnover in terms of transition points. And Naz,
particularly when it's Naz Reid and Carl,
he goes so hard to the hoop.
Yeah,
you know, he's staying on his feet more nowadays, but he's still flying deep into the photographers. You know, and so it's hard to come back from that. Naz is. It will be delicious if we get like a vintage Naz Reid game in these first couple on the road, because that means the Wolves might steal one. And,
it's the counter to the excess stuff that Denver has in games 1 and 2, being at home, like those things, the comfort, the elevation, all of those sort of things. Like Naz and Nickeil too are these counters that the Wolves have in this series that they don't have anything to match that. Like they can't be like, you play this card here comes Justin Holiday. You know, it's just like those cards aren't the same, you know? And so I think the reason we're highlighting Naz more is because we just saw it from Nickeil.
Right.
What we're asking for here from Nickeil in round 1 and not so much from Naz. But
also I
think it was a hard series, right?
Nickeil had better matchups.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
I mean, Phoenix was just tailor-made for Na to come in and do what he did to take away a strength, you know, and to his credit, Na did the same thing when he was a starter against Murray, you know, but I also think that Nickeil did have a really good game where he got like 25 or whatever it was, that one of those games. That isn't going to happen as often as it does with Naz. Naz is going to, you know, when Naz hits like 4 threes and a half, it's not a shock. When Nickeil hit 4 threes and a half, you go, oh man. And he did do it in games 1 and games 3. So I just don't, you know, maybe it's just what that shot is.
I mean, Naz is more of an offensive ceiling player, and Nickeil's more of a defensive ceiling player, which isn't to say Naz can't play defense, and isn't to say Nickeil can't play offense. Like, that's why they're the awesome two-headed 6-man. Like, this is an awesome thing to have in the series, particularly when you consider the opposing two-headed thing looks like Reggie Jackson and Christian Brown. You know, like that's just that. Obviously, it's just a different way of saying like major leg up with the bench minutes in this series for the Wolves. And, you know, and Denver's going to counter that. And they're going to be like, wow, you guys really spent this much time talking about the non-Jokic minutes. We did that for like 31 minutes, the whole series, you know, like that's going to be like, they're going to counter with heavy minutes in this particularly for Jokic. But what I'm saying is when those opportunities come, when the one game in the series that Jokic picks up 2 in the first quarter or 5 minutes into the second quarter, got to go. Like, and you got to hit it. You got to know what buttons you're pressing there. And those buttons include Naz Reid and Nickeil Alexander-Walker. You got anything else to hit here before we wrap?
No, that's good.
Do you want to do like a prediction?
No,
are you there yet?
I really am not ready yet. I'm trying to check the glow of the Suns sweep. I'm trying to put that in a realistic perspective. Yeah. You know, and so there have been times when I can really make a case for the Wolves winning the series. And And before I go there, I really want to think about it, because if I were covering Denver the way I'm covering Minnesota, I wouldn't think that way, I bet. You know, I mean, you know, so you need to. I was confident in picking the Wolves over Phoenix, because, you know me, I just didn't like Phoenix. I didn't like the way they put that team together. Denver.
You like the way they put Denver together.
Tim Connolly has proven to me to be a great GM, and he's put both of these teams together. So they're both really well put together. And Denver has more experience and the best player. So those are things that are really hard to ignore. And home court advantage. Yeah. So, but the Wolves are, my column out today, they have a chemistry that I have never seen. You know, even the Spree, Sammy, KG thing, you know, with Trenton Hassel and Troy Hudson, there was still like Wally Zerbiak, who was kind of like this really kind of odd presence, and he coming back from an injury, and I mean, Fred Hoiberg was great, but it was a different vibe, and some of that was, you had three veterans who, quite frankly, were less inclusive than Mike Conley, Rudy Gobert, and you know, Kyle Anderson have been, in terms of, and part of that is because they're not the three best players on the team, you know? Right. So
I think it's just going to be fun to see game one, and just like get a feel for like what we can apply from the wealth of knowledge that we know from the series and from both of these teams, and seeing it within a playoff context.
Yeah. And one of the things that we do know is that every series is a life of its own. And so that's why I say this glow from this Suns sweep. I did not predict the Suns getting swept. I thought it would go 6 games, you know. But I do think that it won't go 5. It'll go more than 5. That's one thing I will say right up front, is that the Wolves will give them a harder battle than they gave them last year, no question.
Yeah, no, that feels true. It feels like we have a lot to point to make that be almost certain. But, you know, we'll see. Like you said, it's got to start taking on the life of its own in the series. I will point listeners to Britt's column that's up at minpost.com today. Sign up for that and one newsletter for a little extra from Britt, who's normally the columnist, now the beat columnist on the road. Phoenix,
I know,
Denver.
It's a weird feeling, but you know, it's good. I'm not going to practice today. There are certain things, you know, I can pick up the interviews pregame, and I realize, you know, going down there, part of that is just to check in with the group. And I'm going to be on the road with that group very soon for 3 or 4 days. Yeah, 3 or 4 days. So I don't need to do that, but appreciate you guys going down and asking the questions that I get to look at later on.
Right. Well, that's where I'm headed here now. I guess, yeah, for listeners, I'm heading to Denver tomorrow. So
I won't be going until game day. I'm going Saturday.
That might be smart. I always just
I don't know. I mean, they're talking tornadoes or some weird stuff.
Really?
You know? Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, around the nation, not necessarily in Denver, but yeah, I mean, I'm going early in the morning, so hopefully everything will work out.
Yeah, I don't have this totally planned yet, but normally I get there a day early to Denver to be able to record.
Yeah, see your guys, right?
So hopefully, maybe on Friday, I'm to be determined today by me and them if we're going to get a Denver perspective pod before that series starts. Otherwise, you know.
Yeah. Shout out to Chris Finch, by the way. Nobody. I'm sure Finch isn't listening, but maybe somebody who knows him is. And I think that that must have been an incredibly painful injury, and I don't imagine he's feeling really good right now. And it's a really tough. I mean, that is an X factor too. I will tell you is that it's great that you have Mike Inori, and John Krasinski wrote a nice piece on Mike Inori that came out in The Athletic today. But what I will tell you is, and I use this analogy on the MinPost Zoom, you and I talk all the time during a game. We just talk constantly. And we think out loud next to each other and have a smart person, or at least a person we regard as smart, next to us, giving us feedback on that. Well, that is what Chris Finch and Mike Onori do constantly throughout a game.
Yeah.
They do that. If you look over there, they are talking to each other almost all the time. If Finch is sitting down,
have to hit first.
Yeah, whatever. But Mike Onori, not only, if he's taking the reins, not only will be taking the reins, but won't have his conversation partner next to him. And I think that's a loss.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah, it's been a whole weird, like, black box. I'm just, for me, like, my mind, I just think how it works is like, I try to make opinions off of pre-context to that.
Right.
I have no context.
Yeah, we get nothing
on how this works historically, anything. I mean, it's me and Chris opened yesterday's show with it because Micah kind of talked about it at practice. We didn't have much better analysis than that, other than them just kind of talking about how they'll do it. But what I did bring up was they do still have Mike Conley, and he's always somebody you can talk to.
Yep.
You know,
whether and Rudy on defense.
Yeah.
I mean, Rudy will enjoy the opportunity to dictate the defense more, I think. The
stability of the chemistry within the group to bring it full circle helps stabilize some of this, I would imagine. But again, I don't know. Maybe it is, and we probably won't even ever know until like long down the line, or somebody's like, "Yo, that was actually really hard." But, yeah, right. You know, but you know, we'll see. It's just like,
and there's a contract out on Devin Booker later. You know,
yeah. Yes. You wanted to put a contract out at him.
It was a cheap shot. I mean, he did not mean to ruin Chris Finch, but he meant to give Mike Conley a shot into the fans.
Me and Britt got a little, I was just like, shut up. during the game, I'm like, okay, the game's still
which is always effective with me.
All right, I got to go practice. He's Britt Robson. Follow him on Twitter at Britt Robson. Do read his column at minpost.com. You'll be able to find that there. He's tweeted it out on Twitter, like we've been saying for the other, guys like what Jace and Chris were on this week. Like, no better time to be reading these writers who objectively, comparatively to the other 29 teams, do a really high-level job, and Britt is that in his own unique, very Britt way that is very fun to sit down with a cup of coffee to and just be like, oh, okay, this is how Britt's mind's working today. I really recommend that with MinPost and John and everybody on this beat. No better time to be following along with all of this. If there's a pod out tomorrow, or maybe I'll tweet about it, let you know if we figure out something with the Denver guys. But yeah, probably more information coming from practice today. I'll tweet about that, and maybe we'll hit something some point on Friday before the game on Saturday. But until then, he's Britt, I'm Dane. Peace out.
How I'm feeling, man, I hope it never stop, yeah. Green and hot so you can find me in the crowd, yeah. Don't let standards